All day I call on you, Lord. I stretch out my hand to you. Do you work wonders for the dead? Do the shades arise and praise you? In your mercy proclaimed in the grave, is your mercy proclaimed in the grave, your faithfulness among those who have perished? Are your marvels declared in the darkness, your righteous deeds in the land of the oblivion? But I cry out to you, Lord. In the morning, my prayers come before you.
Welcome to Rest, Remind, Reflect. Today our guests are John and Marisa Stone, and I'm super excited to hear from both of you about this trip to Israel. What was it like?
It happened because Norma Ressler, the wife of Mark Ressler, who was the first founding pastor here, said, hey, let's do a trip to Israel. People like to go with their pastor to Israel, and I had noticed that pastors take trips like that, but I had never... Maybe this is the right way. I never thought of myself as a pastor. So she put it together. We advertised it, and we found a company called Emmanuel Tours, Christians out of Israel.
Okay.
The daughter's running it now. The father founded it and just put together the trip. And I think we had room for 50 and like 60 signed up. And then between grandbabies being born and hip replacement and knee replacement. Weddings.
Wow.
We ended up with 43, which is a great number, and we did it. 10 days in it, and I think part of my own experience of the trip is I didn't know what to expect. I was certainly excited about taking a trip. I'd never been to Israel.
Right.
I didn't really, especially having now done the trip, like I said, I didn't know a lot about Israel before I went. I knew a lot about the New Testament, Old Testament, and the stories, but it was a very encouraging and yet intense educational experience.
It was like drinking from a fire hose. I mean, you just couldn't take it all in. It's like what little splashed in your mouth, you were like, oh, okay. It was good, though.
Would you change that if you could and go back and say, let's slow it down, let's pace it out? Or would you still prefer a fire hose just because of all the richness of what you're experiencing?
I think if I'm never going back, that's what I need. I want to see it all.
Yeah.
But if there were a second trip, I might want to slow down a little bit and see things more. Well, even at first, we got off the plane and we went straight to Jaffa, which is Philip. Well, what is that place?
No, Jaffa is where Peter was called to go down and meet to the
I know what's
Tanner's
the other
house.
name of it.
I don't remember the name.
Anyway, there's
You're
another
right.
name.
It's called something
anyway,
else.
it's something by the sea.
We land. We go to Jaffa. We get in a hotel for one night. Then we go to Galilee, and we stay in a hotel for 4 nights. On the way to Galilee, they're saying, you see these fields out here? See all those yellow flags? That's where mines are.
Oh, welcome.
And you're like...
They say people don't get killed by the mines. It's mostly just a cow here and there.
Oh, gosh.
Poor cow.
Hey, right. Okay, everybody's having burgers tonight.
That's right.
Right. Jeez, that is crazy.
The other historical moment, I think 1972, Syria invaded Israel and Egypt invaded Israel, and there was a 21-day war. And there was this very famous tank battle. We went and saw that site, and it was a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
Here's a little...
Because the tanks are just still sitting there.
Oh, I didn't
where people
realize.
died. And
And even standing there, right off the plane on the bus ride, you're just like, wow, this is probably where Peter was. Anyway, our guide was amazing, and he, he's an Israeli, Jewish man. He knew so much about the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament, and he just told us so much. And then he, every time, turned to John and said, Pastor, would you like to say a few words? And of course, John always had
sometimes, most
of the time, he had something to say that was fantastic, that added to it spiritually.
If you're watching this, I'm not checking text. We have the itinerary of the whole trip. So when she said, well, I'm checking to see what Jaffa was called. So
Yeah, something. Anyway. But yeah, it was.
So we'll use Jaffa as an example. So I'm not finding what else it was called. And I think the New Testament calls it Joppa, like P, like with P's instead of F's. But Peter went down there in obedience. I think this is Acts 11, 12, and 13. The vision appears. the sheets lowered down. It's all the unclean animals from the Old Testament law. And it says eat, and he says I'd never eat, and it happens 3 times, and God says don't, you can't say something's unclean that I've declared clean, which is a symbol of the Gentiles. Immediately people come from Joppa and the house of the tanner, and Peter goes down there. He would have never gone to meet a Gentile. He would have never gone into a tanner's house. What's interesting about it is that so in that city they're not exactly sure that's the house, but you're within 100 yards of it, right? Real story from the Bible. Then you went down and you realized, well, this is a seaport. This is the main seaport. So not only is the symbolism to go to the house of Simon, the tanner, but it's also a symbol that the gospel should go out from Jerusalem. It's not that people simply come to Jerusalem, but they should go out. But you also saw where the Romans had taken over the city, and we'll talk about this maybe several times, but had built a small Rome. So we were on the beaches where they raced the horses, and then there was a theater, and then there was the baths, and there was the palace. And so, but you also had in that town a fort built during the Crusades.
Wow.
So it's just sort of like, so it's hard. You kind of know that history, maybe, if you're an engineer or didn't major in history, but you're aware of it. But like suddenly it's all there in front of you, but it's like there's 300 years, and they're telling you 300 years of history and facts and scripture and here and this. And so and you did that 3 times a day a lot. You would do it 3 or 4 times a day. So you would go to 3 or 4 places. So you're like thinking about, is this an Old Testament place or New Testament place? What did the Romans do to it? What did the Persians, whoever, do to so it was just multiple things. So it was really good, but you couldn't. My instinct was if I did it again to hire a videographer and almost to plug into the tour guides, mouthpiece. Then you would have somebody videoing all of it, and you could go back and watch it.
Right.
It would be hours upon hours upon hours.
That's right.
You did that, yeah.
Wow. So how did what effect did that have on you, knowing these things and then being in the location?
The house.
Like Peter was here, Jesus walked here.
Yeah.
What effect did that have on you?
Well, already you, even reading the Old Testament, you read about Bethlehem and you think, oh, I've been there. I know where that is. The prophecy of Jesus being born in Bethlehem. Or, I don't know, the whole story about when David was hiding in the cave and Saul came in to relieve him. Well, you talked about it in the sermon on Sunday.
Yeah.
Where we saw the caves on the cliff. And one of those was the one where King David was hiding. And Saul
whole army was hiding.
Yeah, and Saul came in and he clipped his edge of the
Right.
robe off rather than killing him. So it's crazy. You just think, man.
I think, to piggyback on that, I believed the Bible was the Word of God before I went over there, and that didn't change. But it's like, oh, this is real.
Physical.
Yeah, it says Jesus went in, when he rode into Jerusalem on the donkeys, we didn't necessarily, we saw the road where that probably took place.
We walked on it.
He cleared the temple, and it says then he went out to the local town where he'd raised Lazarus. And you're like, well, gosh, that's true. It doesn't feel like the time will fit. Well, that's only 400 yards. You stood on the Mount of Olives. I could walk into the temple and out there in 2 hours. That's nothing. Like in some places, it felt smaller. Like you realize Jerusalem was a tiny place.
But bigger in the Sea of Galilee where you think, oh, he went from side to side to side. He went all over the Sea of Galilee.
Yeah, some of that's true, but I just mean
bigger.
some of it just, you could picture it. The Grand Canyon probably doesn't make sense to you till you stand in it.
Yeah.
You believe it's true, you've seen pictures, you know it. You have a very different experience of the Grand Canyon when you stand on the edge of the Grand Canyon, look over and see the river and see all the grandness of the canyon. I think that was just true. It was like, oh, this is really true. So I wouldn't say it changed me. I would just say it became more real. Galilee, the Sea of Galilee, which is not a sea, by the way, it's a very small lake. it's a valley of mountains, and so there's you don't go down the Sea of Galilee and have flat like when you in Tucson you come out of the foothills and it's flat. These mountains on all sides just go in. The Sea of Galilee is just the cleft cut out by 3 mountains, and across from our hotel was a city on a hill. And at night you're like, oh, that image of a city on a hill is brighter and fuller than the way we experience that in Tucson. The foothills are actually dark in Tucson, and cities turn off lights. Like, it would be unhideable. So there were small moments when we sat in the cities where Jesus cursed them for not. He said, if the miracles done in Sodom and Gomorrah, well, no one lives in those cities. There's no one the curse really is true. You see a prophecy fulfilled, and it kind of makes the hair on the back of your head stand up. And let me say this to be helpful in the confusion of trying to communicate this. That in some ways, trying to answer the question, what is this trip like, depends on what you mean. So so we learned a lot about, we went to a lot of New Testament sites. We went to Old Testament sites, probably fewer, but, for instance, we went to where the temple sat when they brought it into the land, and it sat there for a long time. But we also saw archaeology both related to the Bible, cities they've dug up, and hey, this is where Jesus was, but we also saw cities that were unrelated to the Bible. A lot of Rome did a lot of building through there. You saw a Muslim fort that was built during one of the Crusades. It's the biggest thing literally the biggest thing I've ever seen on top of that mountain. In terms of a fort, I can't even describe it. And then you just learned a lot about modern day Israel. Like, Israel is a country, and the Palestinians and they share the land. And so there's a lot of politics to that. There's Palestinian controlled and Israel controlled. Then there's even Palestinian controlled but Israel security and vice versa. So it's one of the reasons it's overwhelming is if you just said we're only going to study New Testament things and we're going to think about them, you still probably would have had a lot of information, but I think like having one file or one notebook, it'd have been easier.
Right.
But you're sort of here reading this passage, if they had done the miracles and then, here's a town the Romans built you've never heard of, and you're going to see 2.5 hours worth of stuff you've never thought about. So
Herod the Great built this.
Yeah,
you're like, okay, Herod the Great. That's the one who tried to kill Jesus when he was first born, I think, right?
And now there's some physical structure that you can see and touch.
Yeah, but it's also like I don't. You're sort of studying 4 subjects, and that didn't make it hard. Just like I was having lunch with David Stombaugh went with us on the trip, and he said, I'm having a hard time telling people about the trip. I said, I am too, until I realized. I'll ask people, do you want to know about archaeology? Do you want to know about New Testament? Do you want to know about Old Testament? Do you want to know about modern day Israel? Because that's what we learned about.
All of it.
All of it at once.
Wow.
And really, even you learned about the Middle East conflict a little bit.
Yeah, because even while we were there, the bombs were whatever. Missiles were going, and not where we were, obviously, but we heard about it. And we were like, wow, okay, that's just above us, happening at the Gaza Strip or whatever.
Wow.
Yeah.
How does that work? I mean, it's one thing to hear that. You hear things like that on the news, but...
Well, our bus driver actually lived up there. He was great. We left him.
Down there.
Down there, wherever. I'm not good with geography.
That's all right.
But he showed us a video of how the shield that they have intercepts the missiles.
It's called this Iron Dome, but what it
Iron
means
Dome,
is,
see?
Right.
when they shoot missiles, other missiles go up and blow up those missiles.
Right.
But that's called the Iron Dome. So
he actually showed us video though of it from his house. Like, this is taken from my house.
So one of the things you couldn't communicate to somebody, and I don't know that I understand it, is they live in a war zone is too strong of a language, but they live in a place of constant conflict that often involves or can involve bombings and gunfire and like long-standing disputes about land. And I mean, you'll pass through a check site and there are soldiers with guns. You kind of got used to that. But interestingly enough, when the missiles were fired, which was in response to Israel killing three people they claim are terrorist leaders, and they certainly may be. I just don't know.
Sure, yeah.
That was all in the south. They shot from the Gaza Strip. I mean, because they will shoot missiles. So one of our people had an app that told him about the missiles, and it shook him up, and it should have shaken him up. I'm not mocking him. But you're looking around Jerusalem, and they all have that app, and they're like, okay.
I'm watching the news about an apartment building that's hit, 40 missiles launched, 40 more. This is Jerusalem at night. They're playing sports right here. They're playing sports over here. That is dead south. That is straight towards the Gaza Strip, right past this hotel on the horizon. I bet the horizon does only 6 miles because it's hilly. Traffic everywhere. So it's just, tell you what, it's amazing because they live in a war zone. It's just, it's not normal. It's been escalated, but gosh, it's weird. I'm wondering though if we get disrupted airlines tomorrow out of Tel Aviv.
It was like
Well, even our bus driver.
it was like it rained.
Yeah.
It wasn't like there was. It's a missile strike. No one died while we were there. There were 5 straight days of missile strikes. So I don't know what that means. I don't know if the missiles are not that accurate. It's also true that if they shoot missiles either side into certain places, there are Israelis next to Palestinians. So if you had and if you shot at Jerusalem, you'd kill your uncle if the
your own
missile
people.
goes off.
Oh, right.
So like these are your family members who are living alongside Israelis. Even though,
Right.
so Bethlehem, for instance, is completely Palestinian ruled and Palestinian security. Well, if you shot a missile and it turned off and went into Bethlehem, you're destroying both Muslim holy sites and, again, your uncle. So it's really the whole
Poor uncle.
Well, yeah, but yeah, Israel's the size you told me of New Jersey. It's not even big. Like you can drive up and down it in a day, right?
Wow.
And so there's a lot to this because I think what struck me about the military action is it spooked us, and all of our family members are like, maybe you need to come back. Israel didn't miss a beat.
No.
They didn't shut something down. School.
They're used to it.
It was just, but that's something you can only learn if you're standing there. I don't mean you
Right.
can feel what they feel.
But you see the response to it,
Yeah.
or lack thereof.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, one of the things that is striking about this, I only reflect, and I don't know what to do with this. So this could easily be overstated, but so much of what you're studying, not all, is about conquest or about. So that when they began to take the promised land, they displaced people and they put the temple in Shiloh. Well, there was a battle there. Somebody lived there, and they were driven out, or they moved, and
100
So-
cubits by 50 cubits.
one of the reasons we went to these 2 places that Herod built is that he was so obnoxious. For instance, he had put the image of Caesar in the temple. So think of how offensive that was to the
Yeah.
Jews. So they were trying to kill him all the time. He built these 2 cities to get away from him. He has imposed the Roman will on the Jews, and the Jews are fighting back. And they're fighting back so much that he can't stay in Jerusalem, even though he's the ruler of Jerusalem. So he moves out to these 2 places. When you realize that the Romans were hedonistic, materialistic, and they built baths, which were really sex houses, a theater,
Like the Colosseum.
but a theater,
Well, true.
and then a small coliseum, every town, and a small horse racing track in every town. And you realize they were exporting their worldview. It was really eye-opening to go, oh, they imposed this on Jerusalem. I don't know if this is a highlight, but we went to a place where there was a replica, like very small, like but as big as these 4 offices of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Old city,
you
new
could-
city,
yeah, you could
and you
look
can
at
see
it.
where they put their Colosseum in Jerusalem, where they put their theater, and it was like, oh, the Romans imposed this on everyone. They were exporting their worldview. To stand in those places and to hear the stories, and to do it with 40 people, you get to know there's this common experience of eating.
There's some gardens.
But you're just in the place where Jesus and the New Testament, Old Testament take place.
Bethsaida.
It is amazing. I don't have the right word. Amazing, but like, so there's sort of 2 groups in the world, or more than 2, who aren't fond of Jesus. One would be the Jewish nation that rejects him as the Messiah, even though he claims to be the Messiah. The other would be Islam, who sees him as a prophet, but not the prophet. So in the land where Islam and Judaism are most at war, there are Christians everywhere. It is overwhelming when because you're doing a tour and you're on a bus and you're going, it's sometimes you can't get outside of yourself. But when you step outside of yourself and you like think of a drone shot, we'll just use the Wailing Wall, for instance.
Here we are at the Wailing Wall. There's a male section and a female section over here. And the trip's amazing. But there's nothing more amazing than watching these sincere, genuine Jewish followers of Yahweh come to the Wailing Wall to pray. It's amazing. Just a little takeaway, there are 2 groups that aren't that fond of Jesus. Jewish people are not that fond of Jesus. Islam is not that fond of Jesus. Worship everywhere, singing of hymns. Christians everywhere talking about Jesus. And Jesus junk being sold like Dollywood going out of style. Amazing. Come to Israel. It's amazing.
At the Wailing Wall, there were more Christians than Jewish people.
That is wild.
I mean, not every second of every day, but like,
Right.
you had to get out of yourself and see it. So it's an amazing thing to sort of see God saying, you don't want Jesus Messiah? That's fine. I will not leave you alone.
Wow.
And there was worship of every kind. I mean, a charismatic worship. We were worshiping the Roman
Catholics,
Catholics were
Anglicans.
worshiping Anglican. I mean, it was everywhere.
It was also every nation. There was a big, not planned, but a group that was sort of mirroring our tour. Was this large
Nigerian.
2-bus, either Nigerian or African country Anglicans, charismatic. So that he's got the collar, he's the father, he's the priest, he's prophesying. I mean, it was beautiful. And
Yeah, just everywhere you look. It was,
and like one day on the Mount of Olives, it's just where you're like, as far as you can see are white tour buses
yeah.
with 50 Christians after 50 Christians. We saw Germans, we
Yeah.
saw
It
Russians.
was, yeah. Every tongue, tribe, and nation.
There are 40 Christian groups there with 40 pastors reading the New Testament or Old Testament, some of who are singing.
Wow.
All are teaching from the Bible, and they're all talking about Jesus. So it's this crazy juxtaposition. Both these groups are like, Jesus is important, but not that important. And yet, Christian after Christian after Christian is there. Like in Bethlehem, which is Palestinian-controlled, Palestinian security, Christmas hymn after Christmas lesson after Christmas hymn after Christmas lesson. It just was interesting that I think the way I said it was, maybe more so to the Israel nation. Like, you've rejected Jesus, so I'm just going to shove him in your face.
On every corner. I'm going to tell you that one of the best things about the trip, and I guess this could have been anywhere, but was we got to know those 43 people so well. It was
That
so
is
much
cool.
fun to get to know people in our church who we didn't know. I mean, we knew. We were the only ones who knew everyone on the trip, but
Oh, okay,
we got to
gotcha.
know everyone so much better. Well, we were eating our meals together, which is one thing. Breakfast was a buffet, dinner was a buffet, and then lunch
Okay.
was just wherever. And you're on the bus with those people and seeing all these sights with them. It was just, I loved it. I loved
Yeah.
walking the paths with different people and sitting with different people at different meals and,
Right. Just kind of sharing perspectives and thoughts as you go along, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
and life,
Yeah, and you also had these moments like there are two places they tell you to sing songs.
Oh yeah, that
And
was
we sang
beautiful.
instead of these like perfect acoustics, we sang hymns.
One in Bethlehem, we sang a Christmas song.
That
and
was
then-
cool.
Yeah,
That is
and then
awesome.
the other one was
At the pool at
where
there
some
are two
people
pools,
were healed.
and one of them has a Catholic church there that's
Acoustically
perfect,
beautiful,
acoustic,
yeah.
beautiful. We also took communion at the,
Place.
but which one place?
the place.
In fact,
Yeah.
they set it up. Everybody was taking communion. Here's a fun observation. You heard me say this. So there's 25 reasons everyone should do this trip if they can. Not everybody can do it, but you should. The first is I do think it just makes the Bible come alive in different ways. Not radically, like you'll never get over it, but just to stand in those places and to hear the stories. And to do it with 40 people, you get to know there's this common experience of eating. But you're just in the place where Jesus and the New Testament, Old Testament take place.
Then sings my soul.